Is it OK for energy companies to make £1 billion a week in profit? Some of the UK's biggest suppliers made £65 billion last year when most of us have been struggling during the cost of living crisis. Is that fair? Or is it just how business works? After that, we'd love your thoughts on the government's plans to deport foreign criminals. The Justice Secretary says foreign shoplifters, thieves and drug dealers will be expelled from the country and banned from returning rather than being jailed here. It's claimed it could free up prison spaces, but do you think it would work? And at 12, should we increase the minimum age for gambling? The government is trying to crack down on problem gambling after a steep increase in it since the pandemic. At the moment, the minimum age is 18, but should that be higher to deter young people from doing it? Then, should we cut the school summer holidays? A new report is recommending the summer holiday in England should be cut from 6 weeks to 4, with longer half terms instead. Is that a good idea? You can call us on 0207 862 2222, 0207 862 2222. Calls from landlines may cost up to 16 pence a minute, plus any call setup fees, and calls from mobiles may cost considerably more. To send us a message, head to Facebook or Twitter and search for Jeremy Vine on 5. And of course, you can use the hashtag #StormHuntley. So, let's get into our first topic now. Is it OK for energy companies to make over £1 billion a week in profit? Results for Shell, Equinor, ExxonMobil and BP, some of our biggest suppliers of gas, made £65 billion net profit last year, while here families struggled. 13% of households were in fuel poverty last year, close to 10% back in 2018, so it's on the way up. Although the energy price cap came down to an average bill of £1,700 roughly in April, it's still way more than 2021 prices. But energy companies, we know, generate tax for the rest of us. Many of the elements which created these higher prices also were outside of their control, the war in Ukraine being the obvious one. And they took a big hit during COVID when many made a loss. So, are these profits fine or way out of line when so many are struggling? Get your calls in now. Maybe you're sitting in the cold reading about these profits, wondering how they can be allowed. James, £1 billion a week for these companies. How can that possibly be right?
I think you've got to add in the detail before you can do the analysis. So you're talking about energy companies and then you're talking about the bills that we pay for our energy. They're two separate entities. So you actually need to split the two, and you also need to understand that the companies like BP and Shell, they may have their distributing companies for domestic energy, but again, they're separate organisations. These are worldwide companies. When a worldwide market is priced in the way that it is, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of things wrong with the way that oil and gas prices are regulated across the world, but that's kind of the way it is, then we should be pushing for those to change. So when, for example, you have oil-producing companies in the Middle East or whatever it is deciding to restrict production, so prices go up and we all get stuffed. But we do have these global companies which are making these significant returns. The Chancellor put up the profits levy, so the amount of money that we are getting in through the government is actually disproportionately large compared to what's happening at a domestic level. But what we should be really looking at is how domestic energy is supplied to us. It's one of those few things, in my view, which is both an essential and a luxury. We could price it that way. It's one of those things also where people overuse and perhaps underconsume sometimes. And again, there seems to be little way that we can make sure that people are able to afford what they genuinely need to do. And there has been no scrutiny, by the way, on the daily charges that you have to make for the pipes, so you could have electricity and gas into your home, and you might have to pay £300 a year before you've even used any gas or electricity. And so I think we've got to have a better understanding as to how these companies work and how they're making their money before we start to say, oh, £1 billion a year, a week, that's too much money. It's just like, actually, I'm delighted we've got these companies making so much money and building into our profits and tax revenues in this country. We have to have a better way in which our energy companies are regulated. The energy price cap was a stupid policy off the back of an Ed Miliband idea that didn't really work. It's actually made things worse for a lot of consumers, and Ofgem and the people who are supposed to oversee it are asleep at the wheel.
OK, so...
Sorry, I just had a long rant.
No, it's
the detail's important, though.
It is good to set up the detail.
Yeah,
You're right.
it is important.
Like, we lose detail, like the standing charges. Like, within our bills, we look at the average price, and actually we miss the detail that standing charges, which we can't avoid.
Which actually does more damage. So to older people who have been suffering in the cold and the dark because they think they're saving money...
At the wrong time.
At the wrong time of day or of the year.
Yeah.
In fact, if we didn't have those horrible standing charges that have been going up at the same rate as energy prices, where they shouldn't have been. They should have been inflationary or no more.
But we do look at British Gas's profits as well. So you're separating out the providers, the generators, if you like, and then the suppliers to us. British Gas's profits, 750 million, tenfold increase. So it's not
But not
just
from their distribution business, not from their home energy business.
But we somehow... don't we just seem to end up paying no matter what, whether prices are low, whether prices are high, Gina? We are sitting here now paying the price for what's happening in the
For a dysfunctional marketplace, because it actually needs reforming. And this is the thing I think we're talking about. Is the global pricing is one thing, but also just to focus on 1 year. Actually, these companies make losses in other years. So, you could look at something, I know parties and politicians are pushing for windfall tax. You could do it, even extending it over a 3 or 4 year period, because you have to look at, you can't just look at 1 year profit in isolation. That's not how business works. And the other thing I'd say is I've spoken to a lot of these big companies as my role as leader of True and Fair Party. And what they're saying is we want to invest some of our profits domestically into the transition to green and clean energy and lower cost energy. But politicians are not listening to us. They're trying to be involved and they are not being listened to. So there are other things
you're right
they can
about
do.
politicians not listening, because
They're
the thing
not
is
listening.
that politicians aren't actually listening to the real problems within this market. And if you allow, for example, people to go after energy companies, it's disgraceful, they're making so much money, we can't afford our energy bills. What about the people who can't afford food? What about the people who can't necessarily afford to go shopping week on week because of the cost of living crisis? Oh, let's have a look at Tesco. Let's have a look at Waitrose. Let's have a look at all the other supermarkets and how much profit they're making.
You'd have to do capping on profits for every sector. You couldn't pick out one sector or the other. And that's not how markets work.
And also, at the moment, there is no competition. I mean, there is very limited competition between these companies where we can pick and choose.
Look,
if we don't like Tesco, we can go to
But politicians are going to have to wake up to the choice that they can either attack and go to this dog whistling of attacking profits for companies, or they can look at the problem of how you actually transition to clean energy, because the public purse and their money is never going to be able to fund it. So you need these big companies to be part of the solution and to think about how they use their profits going forwards. And they are willing to do that. So these headlines are not helpful at all.
OK, but there is that irony, isn't there, when you're sitting at home struggling for your bills and you see that much money coming in because of this change in prices, you're going to look at it and you're going to say to yourself, something is fundamentally broken, and surely governments are there to equalise that, to make sure...
Look, there are some parts of it that are broken. Standard charges are broken, system is broken, but there's also what government should be doing is educating people about the different tariffs when they come in, what things use, tell people that just boiling your kettle once a day, how much that uses to spike energy use. We use an awful lot of energy compared to our peers in Europe. And the same goes for water. Our usage is much higher because we haven't got a system which actually educates people. And that, I argue, is part of the government's role. It's not just coming down hard and just doing black and white policies which makes no sense, and unintended consequences of doing that's terrible.
But that's why you have a regulator. And the thing is, in my view, that the regulator
not fit for purpose,
is not fit for purpose. We can probably agree on that. But the other thing which I think is also skews all this is tax. So, for example, 60+% of every single litre of fuel you buy is tax. You have, and again, I don't understand why politicians can't see the difference between essential and luxury when it comes to energy. That why, for example, do we have 5% VAT on the essential side of energy bills? They could have reduced that. They could have said, look, we understand that as soon as, say, for example, somebody's got a swimming pool, that's a luxury. So pay the full tariff, pay the market rate. But somebody's trying to heat their home or light their home for just general life, that's an essential.
Really interesting that one of the voices in this debate is actually the CEO of British Gas calling for a social tariff.
Yes.
Calling to do away with standing charges. They've made £750 million profit this year, and yet he's the one that's calling for change.
Yeah, but from other parts of their business. And this is it, that as soon as you start to conflate and bring together all these things, OK, so is it really for a company to use its profits in one part to then subsidise loss-making because of government ineptitude and stupidity on another? No. So inevitably, if they're not able to make money out of the distribution model for home energy, they're going to charge us whatever they have to receive in terms of the base costs of the goods.
We've got loads of calls coming in on this. I want to take one now. Phil's in Somerset. Phil, when you're sitting at home and you see these profits, the energy company profits, what do you make of that? Is it acceptable?
Well, I do to a certain extent, because if you've got a private pension fund, as hopefully we all have, and we were all encouraged to actually invest in a private pension. Certainly, you would rather have your pension fund invested into a company that was sound rather than in an unsound investment.
Phil, there's going to be only a few people, or as a percentage of the country, that have their pensions with one of these energy companies. But we all pay electric bills. That's across the country. Isn't it worth focusing on those people that are paying these high bills, looking at regulating that market in a different way, rather than looking at people whose pensions we need to protect?
No, I can't totally agree, because I live on my own. My electric bill is exactly the same as to heat my house as it is a family of 3 or 4 living in the same house. So I'm still paying the same amount of money.
So what's the answer then, Phil? Because if, from what you're saying, people who are in a situation like yours may benefit from a social tariff, which differentiates, as James is saying, between the need to heat your home or to provide electricity, to receive electricity, and the luxury of overusing that. How do we make that difference?
No, what I'm saying is, if you have a look at your panel, if you have a look at your panel, I'm sure that each of them, as I have, is a private pension fund, not a great fund, but that money that is being invested by our pension funds has got to go somewhere, and the best policy or the best arena for that money to be invested in is in a company.
Gina.
And I think people that don't really follow the situation sometimes when they're young, is that money just doesn't grow on trees. The fund that we get back, and mine's quite a small fund, is been invested in a company that is a productive company, and quite wise.
Phil, I was going to say, so when my real job is I run an investment company. So when it looks at pensions, I mean, it depends. All the pension funds are different. And your oil and gas companies, actually, at the moment, most of the returns are coming from technology and the big 5, not necessarily from oil and gas is contributing to your returns. But the thing is, your portfolio or your investment to your pension will be so widely diversified. And actually, lots and lots of pension funds are looking to not invest in oil and gas companies because they're going more green and they're going for ESG products. So, it's not necessarily just a return on your pensions. But the thing, there are two different things. Your investments and the way you're heating your home are actually two different things.
Of course, they are different things. But then on the other hand, a lot of ESG policies are being imposed on people without them necessarily having the opportunity.
Well, I'm not saying they're great, but that's the way it's going.
But I think Phil has a good point, which is, we gain and benefit from these energy companies in a number of different ways. So the government have imposed their levies on top of the corporation tax that they would pay. The second point, which you made, which is a good one, which is we should be encouraging these companies to reinvest the money that they make into different forms of energy. And some of them are doing a better job than others. And then the last point, which Phil makes, is these companies, in addition to that, they then pay the dividends. And for those who do have shares, and there are a lot of people with private pensions, and actually a lot of people who are working for government and for institutions and for the police and fire and all these other things, they will be invested to a certain extent. And therefore, If those companies are paying back dividends, terrific.
Then you can argue that with the water companies as well. They're paying out back dividends. But
unless they're overseas owned and then they're gone.
But I need to get back to this fact. It is so important that we get back to this point, that these companies should be encouraged to fund the transition to clean and lower cost energy.
And
that's how it helps us.
Where we're told that's what they're doing. They do a great job of PR.
They're not doing it enough.
Spinning.
Yeah, but the government isn't.
The government needs to encourage them
I want
to
to take
do
some more calls. Georgina's in Norfolk. Do you think it's fair that these companies take the profits when so many people are struggling, Georgina?
No, I don't. I think this is so wrong. I'm nearly 82, so I've seen a lot of changes through my years. But people now are deciding, can they eat? They've got to pay these bills first, the energy. It's disgusting. Now, I'm all electric, right? So some days we have a cooked meal, but some days, twice a week, we'll have a pot noodle, and the other day we'll have a tin of soup. My daughter, who lives in Kent, is housebound. So really, because of her illnesses, she needs her heating to be running all day. She can't afford that. She cannot afford it. I actually told the lady, and I've asked my daughter if it's all right to say this, she had a corned beef sandwich yesterday. Now that is so wrong, because she's got a lot of problems. She can't get out. She's only 51. But that's only one example. You take these people with families, besides them worrying about the cost of food and living, they've got to worry about this. It's going up 5%. Where are these people, including me, supposed to find this extra money?
Georgina, I'm working on the basis you've never received a dividend from an energy company. You don't have a private pension that's invested
No,
in...
I don't have a private pension,
And this is what worries me, James, is that we end up talking about these big structural issues. For people like Georgina and her family, it's so far removed from the reality of either putting food on the table or heating your home.
It is, but I think that what you've allowed to do is you're almost conflating the fact that a company is doing well from global business, and then you're talking about a social issue, which we should address, saying we should not have a situation in this country where people can't heat and light their homes and have the basic of whether it's food or anything else. But because as soon as you go down that route, then you'll say that it's immoral for a supermarket to make a profit, that it's unacceptable for any company that does anything altruistic to make a profit. And then you start to disentangle and say, OK, well, then let's have a socialist system where everybody gets given the same and nobody should ever be able to make any kind of profit.
I don't think that's what we're saying. I think we're saying when the CEO of British Gas, which makes £750 million in profit, says we should have a social tariff. What's the thing stopping that from happening?
Yeah, but what's stopping it from happening is two things. We've got a government that makes all the wrong choices when it comes to tax and decisions, that they've been given every opportunity to sort out this country post-Brexit. They've been given every opportunity to sort out this country in respect of its tax regime. We now have the highest tax level for whatever. They seem to spend for 70 years. They spend the whole time bickering amongst themselves. They seem to be filled with a bunch of people who are making and throwing red meat out in order to try and garner some kind of popularity, as opposed to saying, use your common sense, work out what the tax system can and should be doing. Of course, people who earn more should be paying more. Of course, companies that make significant profits should be paying tax, and regulators should regulate, and they're not.
I think what Georgina's saying is that, Georgina, I absolutely feel for you and your pain, because I have a special needs daughter who's 36, who's living in a home, assisted accommodation, and something terrible happened. The energy companies actually, through direct debit, put up the direct debit without any warning, and this is a massive problem.
Yeah.
So they went from £200 and something a month to £900 in a month. And being her mother, I fought like heck to get that removed. But that's happening across the country. You know, we've got a problem here. Companies should not be able...
But that's down to failure. Would you agree then? That's a failure of regulation.
That's failure of regulation. And I'm saying that what is fundamentally wrong with all of this is the regulation of these industries is not working properly.
Okay. I want to take a call from David. He's in London. David, are these profits fair? What should be done to mitigate them and help people with their bills?
Excuse my voice. These bills are fictitious bills. That's the start of it. The smart meter, they are regulated by the supplier. They've got a budget to meet. whether you use it or not. They've got a budget to meet like £1,500 or £2,000 a year. Divide that by 12. Whether you use it or you don't, you get a bill. People do not read their meters, or they do not know how to read the meters. I've got a gas bill here I haven't used for 7 years, 7 years, because I'm a widower now, so I'm a single person living in the house. I'm in the front room in the cold, right? But I've got a bill here, a new bill for £1,500, right? They're intimidating me that they're trying to chase it after that money, right? They've got the powers, they've got the money, right? I'm an owner-occupier. If I don't pay it, why should I pay it if I haven't used it? And this is where a lot of people are getting themselves into debt, because the people supply electric and gas, right? Put them in the blacklist, right? Then you've got problems. I was listening on a program with people in flats, right? My sister was in a flat. There's no gas. It's just electric, right? Electric bill just runs wild, okay? Not everybody, I'm not saying it's deliberately, but if you're cold, you're going to get warm in one way or the other, you see? And this is how they intimidate us. Okay. As I say, I've got an electric bill, right? I've got a smart meter, right? I've got reading on it, right? But I still get the bills, right? All of a sudden, now, I'm in one room, £50 for a week. That's a lot of money.
David,
I've got no gas cooker. I've got no electric cooker. I use a camping stove.
David, I just want to say, when you speak to your provider about this bill, they are duty-bound to try and help you through this period. You've got to remember that. When you speak to them, you receive a bill like that, they have to be able to offer you a plan to get through this period to help you at least manage that debt. It's worth speaking to your council. They often have discretionary funds available as well. If you go to them, they might be able to help you through this debt.
Can I also add that the Citizen Advice Bureau have actually set up a service to help people to deal with their energy bills. Yeah. And so think about your local CAB as well.
I'm so sorry to hear that you're in that situation, David, and please share your details with the team. Let us know how you get on with that, and any advice, any help we can offer, we will. Thank you for all your calls on this. Thank you, panel. We have to...